Well, hello everyone. I am super excited for today for this webinar on an unexpected journey, how durable skills shape career paths. I'm Dan Harten. I lead the customer marketing team here at hireEZ, and I am so excited to host this promising discussion. Today, we're talking about career paths and how they are often anything but straightforward. Traditional hiring practices tend to focus on specific experiences and those hard skills, but we're here to explore why durable skills like communication and problem solving are the real keys to success. These skills not only help people thrive in different roles, but also make a strong case for rethinking how we evaluate talent. I'm thrilled to introduce two of my very special friends, Jason Putnam. He's the Chief Revenue Officer at Plum. Jason is a forward-thinking leader who helps companies unlock potential by focusing on skills that really matter. And of course, our very own Shannon Pritchett, Vice President of Marketing at hireEZ. Her journey is especially inspiring. She transitioned from being a recruiter to becoming the VP of Marketing in just a few short years. Her transformation is a real spark to anybody that's really looking to pivot and based on her incredible skills that she has uncovered throughout her career. Together, they're going to share unique stories, how durable skills have shaped their careers and strategies for so many people. And we want to hear from you too. So please drop your questions in the chat throughout this session, and let's keep that conversation engaging. So without further ado, I want to just introduce Shannon and Jason to the conversation. So welcome.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
So let's start off. Jason, tell me a little bit more about who you are, the company at Plum, and then we can revert it back to Shannon.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. For those who don't know, Shannon and I, we've known each other, it's at least a decade, Shannon. We've never done one of these, so it's super exciting. Not only the same industry, we think alike, we're friends, but we've never done this together, so it's fun. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Plum. I've been in the space from an HR tech perspective for a very long time. I've been at Plum for 3 years. Some people call us an assessment company. We really have two sides of it. One that you put up on the QR code, Dan, is very much a career management platform. It's free. 50,000 people a month take it. Many of them are organic, and they come in, they take Plum like you have, like Shannon has. I have Shannon's profile up over here so we can dig in if we need to. Probably why we get along based on some of our personality types and those durable skills. But yeah, anybody can go take it, learn more about yourself, build some coping mechanisms, look at different jobs you may have that are a good fit for you. So that's great. And on the other side, companies use us to make sure they're really bringing the right people in from a talent acquisition perspective. Because as we know, it's getting harder out there. There's some roles where you don't have enough people. There's some where you have too many. So what are the ways you're going to look to differentiate those people coming in? And then many of our clients use us on the talent management side, using that same durable skills data to be able to look at succession planning, leadership potential, and anything else that falls under there, as well as culture.
Awesome. Shannon, tell me a little more about you.
All right. Well, yeah, recruiter turned community leader turned marketing leader for hireEZ. We just successfully deployed Plum to help us identify a brand new position at hireEZ. So it was a really fun journey. As a recruiter, and to steal the words of my mentor, Jerry Crispin, a lifelong learner of the industry, I know so little about skills and potential. And we've always said it our whole entire career, let's hire for potential. But that's something as a recruiter you just struggle with because you're so wired to focus on job title, job description, right? Past experience. And, it's kind of like what recruiters have always used and what I always used to really help identify which people would be a fit for a role and which people would not. And then we let the interview kind of determine what we're looking for. But there's only so much an interview can uncover. So I was really excited when Jason took this job at Plum. At the time, I didn't know much about it at all. Just learning about it and using it and taking the assessment myself, was able to see like exactly what they're doing and what they're trying to build. And we were able to layer that on top of hireEZ for ultimate success. And I thought it was so cool to finally have insights into what motivates people, what drains people, and then the potential that people like to have. So I did fall into marketing accidentally. I had like Jason, I've known our CEO at hireEZ for just about a decade. And the fact we probably all met around the same time. And he saw something in me that I never saw in myself. And, I remember having this conversation, right when I first started of becoming the marketing leader for hireEZ. And again, it was caught me by off guard. And he kind of put it this way. He's like, I see these skills in you. This is a weakness that we need. And this is a career path that you can go on. And it was something that, again, I like to learn. I like the challenge. I like something new that I said, absolutely, let's try this journey. And so, I've been able to be somewhat successful, through his belief, but also I love operating in a job I'm still learning about every single day. So it's been a fun transition. I think that a lot of people can apply skills that they've learned throughout their entire life to make a career shift. Excited to dive into some of these topics today.
Let's talk about those skills. Skills could be a buzzword within the recruiting or just in the industry as a whole. How has that changed, and how has skills turned from a must-have or a I like to have to kind of a must-have? What's that switch and pivot within recruiting right now?
Yeah, I'll hop in from my perspective. It's only going to get worse and it's only become more difficult. So as automation and AI continues, there's a great futurist, his name is Ira Wolf, and he talks about this concept called the pace paradox. And everyone should go read what he wrote on it. Essentially what it says, if you're not already scared enough about change and how quick it's coming, is that the amount of change that happened from 2000 to 2004, so a 5-year period of time, that same amount of change has already happened this year. And in 20 years from now, that same 5-year amount of change will happen in a matter of weeks. So when you ask about skills, there's really two ways to look at skills. One is things you learned, right? Shannon and I were not born knowing how to ride bikes. We had to learn that. Maybe you had to learn how to code or speak a particular language. Those are the things you would normally have on a resume that people will look at. But the fact that the half-life of those skills, those hard skills, is now like 2.5 years. You have hiring managers saying, I want 5 years experience. It's irrelevant now. And if you think about a typical coder out there, all the skills they need are now different, right? They're going to have things that are much more on the durable side, the soft skill side, like communication. They're going to be communicating to AI versus writing their own code. And if you have a coder who, can't communicate well, like Shannon can, then it's going to be a problem. So when you look at that pace of change in AI and you say, what's going to be left to differentiate humans from another human? And it's really who we are as humans, our humanity. That's the only thing that's going to be left from a personality, our drive, how well we work with others, all those things that traditionally we as hiring managers or recruiters would use our gut to feel for. It's a very scientific thing. It's been around 100 years, but now being able to do that in a much more humane way and do it at scale, to me, that's the future of where skills are going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was going to just compliment that. I think that this is the future of talent acquisition. And I think it's still not widely talked about because so many people still don't understand it. And I think the need comes back down to we need to move away from resumes, right? Your resume gets you in the door and it will always get you in the door. But I've never read a resume and be like, I know this person. I understand this person. I could see this person in the job, right? And we all know the tricks of the trade of how we make a resume stand out and look better than, other things. But that's not fair. You need to stand out because of who you are, like as Jason said, really, not what you've done. And here's an interesting statistic that I read in Clear Company a couple months ago. 74% of employees feel that they are not reaching their potential at work because of a misalignment with their skills and motivation for their current role. So 74% of the population is in the wrong job for them. And I would bet that's even higher for talent acquisition, right? And so understanding these factors in upfront really ensures that not only you're going to have a better job fit for that person, but what's that going to do? It's going to help them with retention. It's going to help them with productivity, and the company and the individual are both going to win at the end. And that's what it's all about. I can't count how many jobs I left early in my career because I felt like I had reached my potential. And so, was I in the wrong job? Maybe, but we've never really looked at it that way. And so, this is why I think it's not, again, you're looking at not necessarily what you've done, you're looking at who you are as an individual, and that should matter much more.
Yeah, and in you, Shannon, Steven saw something. You saw something in Dan, right? Again, Shannon's not the only one who wasn't in marketing, who's now in marketing. We want to hear your story as well. But Shannon, you brought up something really interesting that a lot of people, I think, don't think about, because it's very similar to sales and marketing, where if sales and marketing are not aligned, it doesn't work well, right? So marketing's job is to get people to have interest and learn more. And then those people don't necessarily want to be sold to. And the same thing happens in TA and talent management. So you've had teams that reported to you. I've had teams that reported to me. And the way TA screens people in are those hard skills.
Mm-hmm.
How long have you been there? Where'd you go to school? But I've never promoted somebody because they typed 10 words faster a minute, or because they went to a different school. The reason people get promoted and a lot of times are asked to leave the company is all around those durable skills, right? They're a good team player. They work harder than somebody, right? They play well with others. They're really innovative. Those are the reasons people get promoted, but those who they are as a human. But those are not the things that talent acquisition is using to bring people into the organization.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
I love the assessment too. I know Shannon said Steven saw something in her and gave her an opportunity to flourish. Sometimes I feel like we forget the skills that we have or what we are good at and don't take a back seat and say, okay, let's do some reflection. What am I good at? What gets me up in the morning? What motivates me? And then what also drains me to put myself in the best position to succeed for an organization? And the assessment that Plum has gives some reflection of, yeah, that does energize me in this situation. Or you're right, that drains me. I shouldn't be in this role, or whatever it may be. As you transitioned, Shannon, and did some reflection, Steven saw something in you, but what durable skills helped you make that leap from a recruiter to a VP of marketing? And walk me through some of that journey.
I really haven't looked at what skills have made me just successful besides the overall knowledge that I understand the user and I understand the buyer because I've been one. It is, but when I took the Plum profile, that gave me, I do not have it pulled up right now, but it gave me a lot more insight into who I am as an individual. And it wasn't like I learned something new, but it was just more like it was validated of what excites me. I think where I scored the strongest was in leadership and management. And I remember that was something that I always struggled to get at companies because I didn't play office politics correctly, or I wasn't there long enough. Like Jason said, right? I hadn't been there. If someone was there longer than me, therefore they deserved management, right? It was so hard to eventually build a team. And then I noticed I had worked for a couple companies that just don't have a management structured environment. They were small. It just didn't exist. And not having my team around or a team to manage, was something that, I always wanted. So I was very, not shocked, but it felt validated to see that that's something that I can do. So lead people, was very, very interesting. And I must say that, it's not like, oh, okay, well, I am also good at leading people, therefore I should be a marketing leader too. It's not like that at all. It's not like, Plum doesn't say, oh yeah, you have great lead gen experience. You're going to manage well with paid ads. But what we do on the back end, I think is important to understand is, before we combined it with our position, and if you want to know a little bit more about hireEZ, we have applicant match that looks at hard skills, right? So it looks at the job description, we'll say your resume, and then we'll match people based on criteria that the employer or the recruiter has set, right? You do the exact same thing with Plum. But in Plum, you're more filling out the persona of the type of person that you're looking for. And and you do this through answering questions. And it molds together the type of person that's going to be successful in this role. So it's not going to tell you, oh yeah, go find a recruiter and transition them over. But you start learning about the personality type and the individual that you think can be successful in this role. And I would say layering with hireEZ's technology and then layering it with Plum, we decided to interview every single candidate that applied because we wanted a data point on Plum, a data point in hireEZ. And in the end, the top candidates had the highest hireEZ scores and the highest Plum scores. And so it had good technical fit, which is important. And of course, a good skills-based motivation and driver fit as well. So, I think it's important to know it's not like you can just find a person and be like, I think you'd be better off in this career, because they do need to have some kind of a background on the hard skills. But at the same point, you can kind of see if somebody is like me, probably not the best in the IC job. Dan, how many people are on the marketing team that love being an IC and they would never be a manager? And guess what? Their Plum profiles said exactly that. So.
Yeah, can I answer for Shannon?
Super.
Yeah. So, because I do have the benefit of looking at your profile right now. The same things that made Shannon an excellent recruiter are the same things that makes her really good in her job. The difference between the two is you had enough knowledge and skill and experience in recruiting to be able to kind of do that anywhere because you had the knowledge. But now you're going into something where it's harder to be an individual contributor when you don't have the day-to-day skills. So you talked about managing others. So managing others is, yes, from a leadership, but it's also about managing others from a herding cat perspective. So if you think about what a recruiter has to do, and also what you have to do, you have to lead people essentially on your team. But as a recruiter, you're leading people who don't necessarily report to you and who are probably even have disparate goals. But being that that's something that gets you out of bed every day and motivates you how to put those puzzle pieces together from a human level is why you're good at both of those jobs. And then number two and number three that you have is number two is execution, number three is decision making. So not only can you herd those cats, like you're going to get out of bed every day. And if you have a to-do list, you're going to make sure you're done with that to-do list. You're going to make sure you're adding other things to that to-do list. And then also where some of your trust comes from is not just manage that people like working for you or being part of that management circle that you're doing, but also you're really high in decision making. So they like working for you, they like working with you, but when you make a decision, it's a really good decision. And it's probably a fast decision that's good. So it's building this level of trust. Those three are not in my top three. So when Shannon and I talk, what's really funny is we'll balance each other for some of those things because my top three are not her top three. Right. So I'll add a different perspective, even on a general friend conversation, not just a business conversation. And then she'll be able to fill a gap for me and I'll be able to fill a gap for her, which is pretty fun.
It brings in the human-centric approach that Plum is doing. And you talk about building teams. If you're filling a 5-man basketball team, not everybody can be a point guard. Not everybody can be a center. You have to pick and choose how it's going to work all together. How are you seeing, Jason, organizations, leaders utilizing Plum in that strategy of creating an organization, creating teams that have different skills, different viewpoints, and how is that having success within organizations currently right now?
It's a great question. We always talk about diversity in teams. This is another aspect of diversity, which I think is really important. So Shannon knows Michelle, who does her job here, right? Michelle's number one thing is execution. I'm not super high in execution. Doesn't mean I can't execute, but if I'm going to get out of bed every day, I'm really innovative. I want to come up with crazy ideas. I don't want to sit there and check 100 different boxes, right? So Michelle and I, as we build that as a core unit of our team and then start laying other people in, let's say the marketing team, that comes across really well because everyone's filling those gaps. And as long as we can all get together and they have the skills to do it. If you look at it kind of at a macro level outside of Plum, we typically do business with really large companies, right? The Citibanks and the Whirlpools of the world. They could look at it from a team or a facility perspective. One team's performing, one's not. Hey, what are the differences? They could say, if you're doing this job, we want everyone to kind of be the same. Sometimes that's something you want to do, but a lot of times you want to have people be different. And then they can layer on, which is already in Plum, the leadership potential that people have. So you want to look at it from the aspect of not just can everyone complement each other. But are there, within that complementary group, are there people who aren't being noticed, who are really high in leadership potential, even if they're 22 years old, who can be the next leaders? So, they may not be the best individual contributors, but they may be so high in leadership potential that even though they're a sales rep who's maybe only always 80% of quota, but they may be a phenomenal leader versus the person who's always 150% of quota, who's not really high in leadership potential. So there's so many different ways to slice and dice the data. And what you'll see, which I think is at the root of what you asked a little bit, Dan, is what does that mean long-term, right? Because there's TA is very point solution focused, but what does that mean impact long-term? And you can look at it kind of two ways. The human who's in the role. So we want people to flourish in their role. And if people flourish in the role, the business that they're a part of will thrive, and you can quantify it. So when we asked our clients, they would rehire the same people they hired 93% of the time, which means the people are happy in the role, they're happy in the role. But there's this great O.C. Tanner report that when you match people like Shannon, right? If Shannon's doing those top 3 things that get her out of bed every day, which she's doing at hireEZ, which is why she's happy, if she gets to do those every day, the report says she's 322% more productive in her job. So that's good for Shannon, but it's amazing for hireEZ. It's amazing for you too, or anybody else who works there. She'll stay 3 years longer, and she'll experience nearly 70% less burnout. So if you took an entire organization and used that kind of approach, whether it's Plum or anybody else, and you could make sure people stay 3 years longer and they're 300% more productive, now you start talking about things that the CEO cares about and the CFO cares about from a productivity side.
Yeah, I think that's so important too, because we've talked about burnout a lot in the past and how I am working more hours throughout the day than I ever have before, but I have felt burnt out at past jobs where my productivity was probably under 20 hours per week. How can that be? How do you feel burnt out there and then not burnt out now? And the answer is exactly what Jason said. It's right. As I'm being driven, I'm loving to do this stuff. This is fascinating. This is excites me. So I don't feel the burnout because the motivations are so high. And I have a different use case that I talked to with Carmen Hudson last night with one of the Plum customers. If you don't know Carmen Hudson, she's an author in the space. She's an independent consultant within the industry. So many organizations bring her in to, as in strategic planning for the next couple of years. She's very good at problem solving. And we just happens to be a personal friends, and we were eating dinner last night. And I wanted to tell her about my story with Plum. I said, I noticed a very specific underrepresented demographic that consistently scored high Plum scores for us. And I was like, would you want to guess the graphic? And she did the exact opposite of what she guessed. And I said, no, it's Black women are getting the highest Plum scores for us for our current open position. And that's exactly who we hired. And I was like, and I started talking with some of our managers about this. And I was like, I wonder how many of these women would have gotten overlooked, which history tells us they often do within jobs. And perhaps this was the exact underrepresented skills set and individual that we needed for this position. And so, it's, again, not enough studies were into it, but I thought it was fascinating that you could almost break down the high scores, and it was a particular demographic that scored in the upper 30%.
That's so easy.
That is amazing.
That's amazing. Our philosophy is we always want to screen people in, not screen people out. And it's not an anomaly. Like there's Scotiabank's a big client of ours. And for campus recruiting, they use Plum in other places, but for campus, it's a really interesting use case. They did what you said for campus and early career, Shannon, no resumes, right? And instead you just apply with Plum and you're matched to 16 different jobs. But the reason they did it was a business imperative. The outcomes are more than a business imperative. So kind of before that, they were hiring from, let's say, 5 or 6 universities, all the same universities that the executives went to, which means they all look like me, right? Most of the time. But the problem was for every 10 offers they made, 2 people accepted. So they couldn't just fill it enough. Everyone had a business or finance degree. And so they said, this is untenable, no resumes, you apply with Plum. Fast forward, they're now hiring from 32 different universities. 40% of their hires have STEM and art degrees. 60% are underrepresented minorities.
Wow.
And at the 1 year mark, they ask the hiring manager, would you rehire the person? 90% we would rehire that person. But now you have people who've never thought about being in finance or never even had a way to get into it. Now having a career, they also then look at those people from a leadership potential, and they may take a 22-year-old who started in retail banking and put her on a leadership track immediately.
Yeah.
But they just never would have had the shot, because this goes back to how we started. You have to screen people out because you can't talk to 10,000 applicants. So what happens is you have to have kind of false positives to screen them out, right? Years experience, where'd you go to school? How long did it take you to go? And what we now know is like, there's other ways to do it that are just not only better from a human perspective, but actually generate better outcomes.
I think that's so important, so telling, because we often talk about, I know diversity is always a sensitive topic, and I know it's getting, on not necessarily a priority as it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But when you look at the human errors and human bias in the process, right? And we've all seen those cases where, there's lawsuits ongoing because, certain technology did weed out person because potentially the race. This is a very unbiased and blind assessment that is actually being a lot more inclusive to, again, talent that tends to be underrepresented. And I think that's so unique and so beautiful, because you don't typically start with a position and be like, I need to hire this race and this gender, but again, Plum doesn't care about that. And so it's really shows and gives those people that more of that opportunity, which I think is so valuable. And I've always said, if you've ever talked to me earlier in your career, I will say, take a job as a recruiter, right? I know it's a lot harder now. It will give you insights into every single position that's available, so you can kind of see what's out there. But then again, how do you know if that's going to be really for you? Like, that's what something about the Plum profile, which takes 20 minutes to complete, is really going to help you give you those insights. And I think it's so pivotal, like not only beginning of your career, but as you're making these changes too. And when you look at reskilling current talent, when you look at upskilling talent within your organization, this is something that's really valuable that I think organizations need to consider a lot stronger.
And sorry, Dan, I know you have a million questions, but
Keep going.
When you think about durable skills, put Plum aside, there's so many ways to use them outside of hiring. So I know people who are going to listen to this, like, we can talk all we want, but I think a use case always kind of makes people understand. There's a really, really large healthcare company, and they're going through a multi-billion-dollar HR transformation. Like, that's a big deal. And traditionally what people do with transformation, because change is hard, it's like they tear the Band-Aid off or they go too slow. Like, there's no middle ground. So Plum was the first thing they did. Again, it doesn't have to be Plum, just figure out a way to do it. And what we figured out scientifically was those people who are really high in innovation and really high in adaptation loved change. They ran towards change, right? I am one of those people, right? It's like, let's go, let's do it. I want to go, right? Give me the hardest problem. Something changes tomorrow. Cool, we'll figure it out. So because they knew that about all their humans, they were able to say, cool, this group of people is very high in innovation, really high in adaptation. We're going to let them be the change makers first, irrespective of their title, department. They cohorted people within this. They then also layered on of that group who's really high in communication. So now they were able to say, great, we've got a group of people who are going to run towards change. There's a subgroup of those people who are going to run towards change, who are going to be able to communicate the change effectively to the fast followers. And then we're just going to keep doing this. They were also able to say, of that group, who is really high in leadership potential, who's potentially not a leader today, and let's put them in charge of these groups to lead those groups in doing it. So it doesn't have to be Plum, but there's going to come a point where every other skill is democratized. There's going to be no way to differentiate it outside of the human side.
Yeah.
Think about that with like
That buzzword.
sorry, Dan. Think about it with resumes, right? I know, Shannon, you and I talk about this all the time. AI is writing every single resume. You can easily apply to 1,000 resumes a day. Right? We have clients now who are getting 5x the amount of resumes they used to get. Like, what? How else? It's untenable. How else are you going to do it?
Yeah.
Shannon, you've hired people without a Plum assessment, and now you've hired somebody with the Plum assessment. In recruiting, you've been a recruiter. Now you're a hiring manager within the recruiting background. Half of the time, it's about a gut feeling. of hire managers saying, I just don't have a good feeling about this person. How does this justify or confirm your initial thoughts on a candidate with the assessment piece in the human-centric approach on top of the hard skills?
There's a big difference between a recruiter and a hiring manager, right? I've never seen a hiring manager have good gut intuitions when it comes to hiring, because I've had those hiring managers come to me and being like, I feel good about this candidate. Boom, 9 months later, they're gone, right? Or I have a bad feeling about this candidate and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like the perfect candidate, you moron. Like, what are you doing? And so what is that coming from? That's coming from a place of bias, right? They haven't spent the time talking to candidates and assessing the current market trends that recruiters have. And recruiting has lost that touch in the past decade, right? That's a separate webinar. I will still say the best recruiters entered the industry prior to 2009, just because, we didn't have these luxury tools that we did now. And when I think recruiter instincts, regardless of when you started recruiting, are always going to be that much stronger than a recruiter. And so as a hiring manager, I don't interview on skills at all, or technical skills. I interview on motivations and drivers, right? And that really sets a tone of what I'm expecting. And I like to know more about what is motivating the person, right? Because for a company unique like hireEZ, you need strong motivations larger than yourself to be successful with this job. We're a startup after all. And so what Plum does is it gives me as a recruiter something that I cannot see and I can't probe, right? It's like I could try to build a Plum profile as much as I can through these conversations and probably get pretty damn close, but I don't have that time. And recruiters, the most precious thing that they have is time. And you hear that with every hiring manager or every TA leader right now. Oh, we need to do more with less. We need to cut the noise. Recruiters now have 100 open positions, right? So they don't have the luxury that we did back in the day when we were recruiting, 10, 20 positions and we had the time to talk to these candidates. But that's another data point that is so valuable that you can't go off of, oh, I know, trust me. This is a gut feeling. Now you actually have data. And the Plum profile in the individual represents that individual. The Plum score comes from the criteria that you as a recruiter and the hiring manager set forth. So again, it's another data point that says, actually, this is what you're looking for. Maybe you didn't ask the right questions, or maybe you should trust me and give this candidate one more shot. And so and I thought that was interesting, looking at it from the recruiter lens, looking at it from the hiring manager lens with this position was there were a lot of candidates that were like wonderful on paper. I would have hired them out the door. And once they get to my end of things, then what do I do after I speak with them? I get angry at HR and the last manager that interviewed before me is, why did this candidate make it all the way to me? They're clearly not a fit. Look up their Plum score. Oh, well, I can see why they're not a fit. So, that's what, a realistic use case of what we just went through. And I think it's also really valuable to pick off what Jason just said when you look at AI. AI does job descriptions. AI does resumes. AI is applying for you now, right? We've always joked with LinkedIn profiles not being accurate and blah, 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 right? But that's even more standard today because everyone's trying to get their foot in the door. And the best way to do that isn't about what's on that resume. It's about who you are as an individual. So again, it's giving people more of an opportunity, more of a chance. I don't think there's anything wrong with having AI apply to positions for you because they might find a position you didn't. I don't think there's anything wrong with AI doing a resume for you because last resume I built, I don't remember when, I hired Trish Ryderka to write it for me. And so like, what's the difference in AI doing it or somebody within the industry doing it, right? Why didn't Shannon, seasoned recruiter, write her own resume? Because I felt I was biased and I felt like I've been looking at resumes my whole life. And if I do something, then it's going to, might not be the best. So I don't have a problem with candidates using AI, but I do have a problem with the wrong candidate getting in the door and the right candidate getting screened out because of something we didn't see.
Jason, what strategies can organizations use to shift that mindset of durable skills and doing hard skills and the Plum score? Like, what are you seeing right now? And what are the hesitations in some cases that maybe they are a little hesitant right now, but they're super interested in and want to explore more?
Yeah, it's not a difficult question to answer. It's just an intricate question to answer. Here's what I mean by that. There's not a company we talk to or you guys talk to who don't say, I want to move to be a skills-based organization. Everybody is saying it. I haven't talked to one who's actually done it, right? Because they actually can't quantify what that means. So if you think about the hard skills, the typical eligibility factors that people would look at, because of the pace of change, those are changing so fast, right? It's like sand falling through your fingers. So by the time you categorize every needed skill, half of them are gone. And there's a whole new set of them coming. So that's only one side of the equation. The way I like to describe it is those hard skills are like longitude on a globe, and the soft skills, the durable skills, are the latitude. If you can pinpoint where those two intersect and you end up having a high match for that job, that person is going to be really, really happy in that job, like Shannon is, like I am. I was a very high Plum match for what Caitlin, our CEO, was looking for. I've been a CRO at lots of places. I hop out of bed every day excited to be here, right? So when you can actually quantify that. So when you look at it that way, some of the objections that we hear, it's not just about Plum, but it's like macro objections are, we've got to get through our skills ontology first, but you're never going to get through it, right? And it's actually less predictive of success in a job than the durable skills. Like science points to, not our report, those durable skills are 4 times more predictive of success on a job than the hard skills. Now, if you could do both of them like Shannon did, great. But if it's an entry-level whatever position, who cares where they went to school? Who cares what they have, right? So people just need to, if they want to be competitive and outpace other companies in their space, they need to move to an approach that's going to be vastly different than what they've done. There's just a lot of people when you're in HR, and ultimately TA, which we can argue probably shouldn't be in HR, but is just, they're not change agents. When we run into somebody who is a change agent, they get Plum within 5 minutes and end up being a customer within a few months. If not, just that level of change and the audience that they have to bring in to make themselves not feel bad and not feel scared is the hard part.
Shannon, when you took your assessment, is there anything that stuck out to you when you reflected on it? Or was there anything there like, yeah, that was spot on?
I thought it was all spot on. I didn't think anything stood out, I thought it was really accurate. It is. I love learning more about myself. And there was some details that, it like I said, it was more like validation. And then I thought it was actually more valuable for me to see who I am as an individual and then what that aligns me to. It was good validation to know that I am in the correct job. And, if I ever needed to make the transition, right, it's like I have a good idea of what I want to do. Just as Jason said, he's been a CRO at other places. This isn't his first time he's a CRO. But that also comes down to the environment, because every single company has a different environment, a different work culture and stuff like that. And if I could fill out the criteria for the person I'm looking for a content writer, and Michelle at Plum can fill out the same thing, and it's gonna show up 2 different Plum scores when that individual applies, because we're both looking at different skills there, and that's okay. And so that's why it really does help find that like perfect match. And it's just shows the importance. And I wish more TA leaders understood what skills are required. Again, I think we need to move beyond the buzzword and start seeing more use cases and seeing this into action, because it is so valuable. And skills-based assessments and psychometric assessments have been around for a very, very long time now. Very small percentage of companies actually have deployed them. So I think we can get better at that as an industry.
Jason, have you seen organizations as a whole taking a Plum assessment, or is it a team, or is it a specific rec, or is there different levels? Help us understand how it all works.
There's a bunch of different use cases. The most typical one is they will use Plum for everything. So for talent acquisition, the janitor to CEO, everyone, you upload your resume, you take Plum. And the completion rate's in the 90s. Most assessments are in the 60s because it's such a good candidate experience that we give people something in return. So there's no fear of, fallout. So that's how they're using it on the TA side. When you get into talent management, they're then giving it to every employee to take it. And then they're able to use, number one, the employee gets something in return. They get their own career coaching platform. They're able to see internal jobs if they work at Coca-Cola or wherever. And then they're able to kind of figure out ways to upskill themselves within the durable skills side. So even though, let's say I'm really, I'm low in execution, there's coping mechanisms I've had to build over my career to make sure, when I have to do it, I don't kick and scream and, go drink a bottle of wine. Right. So I have to build these coping mechanisms, and we help people do that. But then we also, at the corporate level, allow them to look at it from succession planning or leadership potential or internal mobility. So, and then the thing we rolled out in May was layering culture on top of that. So now we're able to look at our culture gap analysis, not to just say, is it a good culture or a bad culture? Because there's no such thing. I don't think any of the three of us want to go work for Elon Musk, but there's plenty of people who love to work for Elon Musk. It's not that it's a bad culture. It's just not aligned to probably who we are as human beings. So we're able to overlay that and say, where are the culture gaps? CEO wants this, the employees are experiencing that, or they're not. And even if they are, they may want a different direction on culture. So be able to do that, and we can do it in 8 minutes, being able to figure out that culture gap analysis. That's a typical use case where they use us literally everything, all decisions across.
Yeah. And Dan, how hireEZ comes in and helps. And I think this is such a cool use case too. It's organizations have such valuable data within their applicant tracking system that is just 100% underutilized. If you were recruiting prior to 2009, you always started with your database or your ATS first, right? There was no external sourcing. It was all what's already in your ATS. And the last 15 years, we've really drifted away from that. And we look at products like LinkedIn, for an example, which, is we keep going to when there's a new opening. Imagine going into your applicant tracking system, right? And using our ATS rediscovery product to update and refresh your current database and making those candidates discoverable. And taking those silver medalists, which I guarantee you have already are strongly still want to work with you, but these are going to be your lowest hanging fruit, the easiest to convert, right? To bring on. Imagine running an assessment with them, right? Which you can use our automated outreach to, and really seeing the potential skills that are already within your database. And instead of spending so much money on external hiring and looking at who else is out there in your LinkedIn recruiter license, your job advertisements, your job boards, all that other stuff goes there, but focus on what you already have and doing that kind of a gap analysis to see these people are already interested. They've already risen their hands saying they want to be a part of us. We've already liked them. They would be the perfect fit for this role, right? I think that's how TA needs to look at this as well. And then again, you have the hireEZ applicant match score, which gives you the technical fit for that position as well, if you're looking for more of a hard skills approach too. So, it really can be used in a beautiful way from talent acquisition with people that are already in their database. And I wish more people would start thinking about this future as opposed to we have bad talent quality, we have bad this, we have bad that. No, actually you do. You just don't know how to access it.
Jim, you brought up something really interesting when I talked earlier about longitude and latitude, and I think about the partnership we have.
Mm-hmm.
It's like hireEZ does the longitude, Plum does the latitude, and then being able to pinpoint that's the key part.
How has the hard skills, the soft skills, combining that, how has that changed your interviewing questions that you're asking to candidates? Are you seeing that you see the Plum score come through? You have the hard skills of the actual role that they have to do, combining the interview questions based on their assessment on there's no perfect candidate, but you can kind of dive in deeper based on the two areas, the longitude and latitude. Walk me through that.
I can take that one. It's kind of how I answered the question earlier. I don't need to focus on the hard skills, right? Because it is there. Our technology has said you are a good fit for this job. I can read it. I can see it. We in marketing, you always ask for samples of the work. So there's that checks and balances application in there, right? But I care more, like I said, about the motivations. I care more about people's work ethic. I care more about who they are as an individual, Dan, which is why I brought you on. And so, Dan, you were somebody that that got screened out for technical reasons in the hiring process. Let's not forget that. I brought that up with someone else today. And you had a recruiter that really vouched for you. And not only that, I think before you and I had even spoken, you started emailing me about this position. And so that I didn't have a Plum score on you. But I guarantee you that's exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for someone with that hunger and motivation that wanted this job. I knew you had the skill sets as a recruiter. I knew you did not have the marketing skill sets, but you had the potential. And so to me, that was a perfect example of aligning everything. And you're not always going to have that recruiter that's going to vouch for you. And you're not always going to have that, those data points needed to make the decision. But for me to save time and not focus on the technical side of things and not really focus it, but instead focus on who they are as an individual based on what I just read, that is more telling. And that's exactly what I need to do to make up my mind. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to who we think can best do the job, right? And that's a very clear point. And with the last position, that we looked at, it really came down to who we felt had stronger motivations, not who we felt can actually execute better. And I think that's something we would have looked at the exact opposite if we didn't have the data points from Plum.
Jason, you said something that really caught my interest. Sometimes organizations promote the wrong people because they promote the best IC at an IC role. And sometimes they look over people that maybe don't have the best numbers, but they would be a better leader. How are organizations looking at Plum assessments in that scenario? And how are they better in making those decisions?
Yeah, I'll tell it with one of my favorite stories, but because they have the data on everybody, they can look at it that way. So if you do have like we use sales as an example, if you have a sales rep who's crushing it and he or she is beating everybody and they're really high in leadership potential, that's a really easy decision, right? A lot of times that's not the case. And then you promote somebody who's a great IC, they're a horrible leader, and they bring everybody else down around them. And it's not necessarily their fault. It's just they were put in the wrong position. So we had one of our clients buy another client. And that client that they bought had 100 sales reps. They could only keep 50. So just like Shannon said in her story about hiring, what traditionally they have done? They'd have looked at attainment to quota, they'd have cut at 51, and that's who they would have kept. They looked at it a different way. They looked at with Plum matching to it, but also leadership potential. There was a African-American woman who had been with the company for like 7 years as a sales rep. She was good. She wasn't great as an individual contributor. She was always around 80 to 90% of her quota. She was in the top 5% for leadership potential globally. So not only did they keep her, they put her in charge of a team, right? And that team became more effective. So it's just having those data points and not using gut or not using the wrong data to be able to do it.
Yeah, Dan, look how unique it is for us to promote at hireEZ. If you want to be promoted within leadership, whether it's to get into leadership or to move up a leadership ladder position, then, first off, you have to perform, right, as an individual contributor. But secondly, you go on probation for 6 months. And I loved it with my VP promotion because, we'll pay you for the job. But you get the title, but it says on probation. And then you do a deep dive into how we want you to change in this new role and what you're going to do as an individual to meet that criteria. And then at the end of your probation, you present again to saying what you did or where you fell short or stuff like that too. And then there's 3 things that happen from there. After 6 months, you either get promoted, or it's 3 months in some cases too, but it was 6 months for my last role, which ended up being a year because I did need more time. You either get promoted or you extend, which was the case for me, or you just say, hey, this isn't the best time for it. So imagine speeding up that process a little bit more because you have the data points. And I think that's so valuable because what's burned us in the past has been the wrong people in the wrong roles. And that's not unique to hireEZ.
As an applicant of maybe switching different roles, different industries, how do you think I can utilize it as a candidate? A Plum score, I take the Plum score, it's free. Make sure you do it. You have the skill set. Am I putting that on my resume, Jason? How should I let organizations know my Plum score?
Yes. You don't let them know your Plum score because your Plum score is actually only in correlation to what they want, right? Because to like Shannon's point, Michelle and her may be looking for different type of people, even for the same job, because who they are as leaders may be slightly different. The culture may be slightly different. But of those 50,000 people a month who take it, they are able, a lot of them share it on LinkedIn, right? So they'll share it on LinkedIn. They'll put their link on LinkedIn, but it's much more on us to empower us as Plum to empower them. So we call that product Plum Flourish. And we spend a ton of our development time and efforts in that to make sure we're empowering the human. So they may apply for a job at Citibank or they may be organic. We'll serve them up some career pathing. We're not going to serve them up other jobs. We're going to say, hey, Dan, you're a recruiter. Holy cow, did you know you'd be a great marketer? Here's why. And here's some upskilling you can do. And here's some people you should talk to and be able to do that. But it also provides them interview questions. So if Shannon was looking for somebody who's really high in teamwork, and let's say, Dan, you were low in teamwork, it's not that you can't do the job, but we're going to provide Shannon interview questions to ask you and you interview questions to ask Shannon to make sure. Because we all think we can go do the job and we'll grin and bear it. But the best thing is to just be a good fit for the job. Because the grin and bear it leads to burnout, and ultimately burnout then leads to resentment, and that's why people leave. So we want to democratize access to something that has been gated forever, right? Where you've got to go pay somebody to look at it or do all that. No, we just want to give all the data to you as the human, and you figure out what you want to do with it.
Love it. As we wrap up, is there any last?
I was going to add to that, Dan. I'm just pulling up my Plum profile, right? Because I don't have a score, but I have top talents, right? And let me just read you the two that says who I am. Influential, dominant, persuasive, authoritative, and self-confident. Likely to be focused on practical and tangible pursuits. Professionally, I am a good fit for organizations and roles that appreciate a high value of directness and getting to a solution quickly. Dan, am I direct? A good fit for roles with clearly defined objectives requiring specialized subject knowledge. Okay. Knowing that about me and being able to read it, these are skills that I can bring to the table during that interview. Well, you could share it all you want. Will they actually read it? Maybe, maybe not. But what lacks with a lot of interviews that I've conducted over the years, because it's been in the thousands, is the star consistency, right? The behavioral based interview questions, right? But knowing how I can structure my questions, and hopefully the organizations are prepping their candidates with what's to come, with exactly who I am and what my motivations are, is going to help me as an individual decide if this role is actually going to be for me or not. So it's going to allow me to focus on my strengths and also see potential red flags that I might not see because I didn't bring up those talking points within the interview myself.
Love it.
20 minutes.
As we wrap up, any last minute words of advice, Jason, Shannon?
No, I'm just excited Shannon and I finally got to do this.
I know. It's always nice having a conversation with two good friends.
Yeah.
I said, it's not advice. It's just a statement. I don't think skills or skills-based hiring is nice to have or necessarily a buzzword right now. I think it's keep exploring ways that you can bring this into your talent acquisition process or talent management process, because I think the more you look into it and go down that really fascinating rabbit hole, the more you will see that this is the future and that this is going to be a necessity for you and your organization.
Love it. Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Jason, the whole Plum team, for coming on this webinar and speaking on behalf of them. And just, you guys are making an impact, both of you, to the recruiting community and so many organizations of rethinking the hiring process, doing it soft skills, hard skills, and blending that together to make a huge impact. So I just want to say thank you so much. If you're interested, please check out plum.com as well as hireEZ for your fix in HR tech. So thank you so much. Thank you again. Have a fabulous rest of the day, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.